Oh my god, the Moopsy is the cutest thing ever. I need another doll of it like this, Murph. Don't fail me, Star Trek, like you did with the salamanders in the tardigrade. Don't fail me. I wanted to drink my bones so badly. Hello, interwebs. I hope you're all doing well. I am here with my little Murph doll that's his butt, that's not his face. I'm here with my Murph doll from Star Trek Prodigy to review its sister show, Star Trek Lower Decks. This time, Season 4, Episode 2, I Have No Bones, Yet I Must Flee. And yes, we'll stay spoiler-free up front, but if you have not guessed from my joke at the top here, this episode has one of the cutest things in all of Star Trek, and yet also one of the most terrifying things. It is wonderful and amazing. I had a lot of fun with this episode because, again, it is building off of what I really wanted Lower Decks to do a lot of, and that is moving the status quo forward. A lot of this episode is about, number one, the brilliant character arcs that we've come to know this show for with characters like Mariner and sort of like delving into her psychology and what makes her tick and what she needs to kind of work through in her story, but then also working through the natural just day-to-day mundanity of like things like characters getting promoted. Like the whole storyline with this episode with Boimler is just so much fun, and yet it's literally just like the most mundane thing that would have to happen on a starship. Just what I love Lower Decks for, the like mundane everyday Star Trek stuff that I just like makes these characters feel alive, that we sadly don't get as much of in like the rest of modern Star Trek right now, because everything is like always moving and keeping action going forward. So all of that was a lot of fun. And then there's also some cool little sweet bits with Rutherford and Tandy this episode as well, that I just had a lot of fun with too. So just keeping it short with this one, adorable, fun, everything that I love Star Trek for, and I can't wait to talk about this in spoilers. Alrighty, we are in spoiler territory here, and I know I already joked about it before, but I just have to say, like, Moopsy was the cutest, right? Whenever it said Moopsy, and it did nothing wrong. Look, it has to eat bones to survive, so, like, the Moopsy did nothing wrong, people. Do not get angry at the Moopsy. It was just doing its best, alright? It was just trying its best to drink the bones. I would let it drink my bones if it needed it. Anyways, let's get into spoilers here. We start off the episode with what I think is, not a bad part by any means, but I think the weakest part of the episode, and that's just because it's a little reiterative of last episode. I love the, like, Romulan vignette that we get on this ship where they're trying to out-scheme each other, and they're torturing poor Remans, like, killing them. Like, what did my poor Reman boys do? I made a whole argument why they're the most important aliens in all of Star Trek, and they're just trying to live their best demon-face-looking lives, and they just keep getting tossed aside. It's awful. But I also love the Romulans trying to like out scheme each other. You wouldn't know a scheme from a conspiracy. So all of that was like a lot of fun, and just a nice little high arch Romulan sort of jokey stuff. But it does lead to this ship from the end of last episode showing up and destroying the Romulans in the exact same way. And again, not bad. And I get that the point is to show us that the ship is like a galaxy-wide problem. It's affecting not just the Klingons or whatever. So I don't see how you could do it very much differently. But it just felt a little bit repetitive, especially coming off of last episode where like it was the same thing at the end of last episode. Like I would have liked to space it out at least a little bit more if it was going to be a very similar structure. But the fact that it comes right off of last episode, right into this episode with the same sort of structure going on, I felt like it was a bit reiterative. But then again, like talking that out, if my theory from last episode turns out to be true, and this is like an AI thing, the fact that these scenes are all reiterative of each other, and maybe this is all just playing out inside this ship's like AI or something like that, might speak to like ChatGPT not coming up with any new ideas, but just regurgitating things. So that might actually be part of the point. But for me, this felt a little reiterative at this moment. But then this brings us over the Cerritos and brings me to one of my favorite parts of the episode where Shax and Ransom are working out in the same outfits that Troy and Deanna did in one of the episodes of TNG that was heavily criticized for being just there to showcase their bodies and, oh, look, there's two sexy women working out and having no other point. That is very true. Welcome to Star Trek made in the 1980s. And I like that this is kind of a commentary on that by having the two men dress up that way. It kind of like fixes it within Star Trek canon. It's like, men and women wear this. It's all fine. But also like sort of making fun of that is at the same time. Again, Star Trek Lower Decks doing what Star Trek Lower Decks does. Critiquing and yet loving at the same time. I also love that Jackson and Don are having like marriage trouble, and Ransom said he was like going on the bed because she's hiding under the bed. That was wonderful. But all of this leads to a storytelling trope that I don't particularly love, and that is like the overhearing and misunderstanding bit, where Mariner overhears Ransom saying, "Oh, I know what the plan is to do," with Mariner, and Mariner hearing that and thinking the opposite of what Ransom intended, leading to Mariner having this arc where she wants to rebel against Ransom. So I don't really always love that trope of someone overhearing something and misunderstanding it, but what I do like in this episode is where it leads for Mariner, because it does sort of fit into who she is as a character, of wanting to look for that. She is looking for anything to believe that Ransom does not believe in her. So she wants to hear that, and so that's what she hears. So it works for her character in my mind. I just wish there was a slightly better way to do it, where it wasn't so overtly out of context that like Mariner was intentionally having a bad read of it, instead of like, if I heard that out of context, I also would have thought that Ransom was trying to fuck with me. I would have much rather it have been written in like a way where like Ransom said something that could have been taken either way, and Mariner intentionally took it the way that she wanted to take it as, whereas here I think it was written to be like, oh, she has to take it this way, and I think that would have worked a little bit better for where Mariner's arc goes over this episode. But then this brings us to one of the most melancholic scenes, where all of the lower deckers are getting ready to leave the bunks. And I love Boimler having this moment like, oh, I'm going to miss Denty. I thought that was very sweet. And Rutherford being like, oh, I'm going to miss all of you, so he's going to go and try and get a promotion. I thought all of that was really wonderful, but the moment that hit hardest for me was when they all left and we get this final, presumably, shot of the bunks that have been our lower deckers' home for the past 3 seasons, and you just linger on it for a moment and the light fades out. And that actually like made me tear up a little bit. It's like, oh, that's very melancholic. Our kids are growing up, it kind of felt like, and to say goodbye to this set. I'm sure we'll see it here and there, but overall, we're probably done with this set in Lower Decks, and yeah, it was just a little melancholic moment, and I enjoyed that the camera lingered on it for a minute. But then let's split up the story. So we have Mariner being all rebellious with Ransom, and I love Gary, the ensign that comes with him over to the Menagerie, as Mariner calls it, just constantly giving like the straight man energy of like, are you two breaking up? Or like, I should have been an outpost ensign. Like his little one-liners throughout this whole bit were just great. But then we meet Narj, who runs this Menagerie, and he's like a corn cob kind of guy. It's just a very clever thing. And him being like, oh no, I'm just trying my best. And like everyone accusing him over and over and over again, like even Ransom and Gary at one point accuse him of this, of like having nefarious motives. Like, no, I'm just trying to run a menagerie. What do you want from me? And I accidentally captured humans. I'm just trying to give them back. I'm trying to pay all the laws. Like, Narj did nothing wrong. He was just trying his best, leading to the Moopsy escaping. And I've already said enough about Moopsy, but oh my gosh, this thing is adorable. And like the jokes with it, like drinking bones, was hilarious. And then them getting stuck inside of the like control room, and then it drinking Narj's bones. Like, oh yeah, that guy had a lot of bones. It couldn't have been him. Was just so funny. I love that. It kind of reminded me, and this is gonna be a bad connection, but it just had the same vibe as like that Doctor Who episode from what, like series 12 or whatever, with the 12th Doctor, where it was that little like weird thing running around the ship. This is done much better than that episode of Doctor Who. I love the Moopsy a hell of a lot more, and it's just so cute just going around. I love it. But this all leads to a great culmination of Mariner's arc this episode, where, you know, she's like, oh, you were just trying to, you know, set me up to, like, be undermined later on, and then you were going to demote me. It's like a mind game. And Ransom being like, no, you constantly rebel and push back against authority, and that's why you get demoted, and it's because you just want to be rebellious. You don't want to ever accept someone actually trusting and believing in you. And if you actually believe that people like can believe in you, that you are worthy of that, that people aren't always out to try and get you, then you might actually feel it for a moment. I love at the end of the episode when Ransom has all of his teeth because they used his teeth to feed the Moopsy, and just calling him Gummy. It was wonderful. I love that. But I just love the sweet moment where it's like, you know, you always have my unconditional support, and you will be a great officer. And Mariner actually like smiling at that and taking that on. And I also love that like Ransom just trusting is like, I didn't let the Moopsy out. He's like, I trust you. I believe you. Like, Ransom is the best. Like, just supportive Ransom and trusting Ransom. I love this like development for his character. Like, it's so sweet and wonderful. But that does bring me back to like my initial critique is this arc would have been, I think, stronger for me if it had been clear that Mariner was intentionally misinterpreting Ransom, rather than like if I even heard Ransom's word out of context, I would have thought he was being an asshole. So I would have like I think that could have just made this arc a little bit clearer. But ultimately, this brings us to the humans were the ones that let the Moopsy out. Not a very surprising thing, but yeah, humans are the most dangerous game, not the Moopsy. This brings us over to Boimler's arc, though. Loved this. I have to hand it to Jack Quaid because he's doing a lot of like stuff by himself. He's like, oh, he's going into this room, and he's like, oh, the nacelle's there. Oh, this is awful. Then he has to like wear the glasses. Like that feels like something that would happen on a starship. Like, oh, I have to deal with the damn glow of the starship. I had that problem where like I lived in an apartment that had a street light right outside of it, and it drove me up a wall because like I am a very sensitive sleeper. So just having this light shine on me on a night, just like I could not sleep. So I feel like the nacelle having that same problem would have definitely been a thing that happens on starships. Very relatable. But again, Jack Quaid just like going all out, like his bit. It's like, oh, help me when the nacelle like pops off more. I thought that was hilarious. And then he gets the room in between the two holodecks, and I love that Shaq still considers him part of the bear pack. That was adorable. But him being in between two holodecks, and again, a relatable starship thing like I have been used to in apartments, like hearing like my neighbors have very loud music all night long and keeping me up. Like, again, as a neurodivergent person, like it's very stressful. So I understand Boimler. I relate to Boimler so much. And then just hearing like Shax and Ta'ana just like having an argument and being like, can we just use the program as intended for once? But then Freeman on the other side being like, now that I am president of Starfleet, was wonderful. But it ultimately all led to the sweetest moment of the episode for me, which was Boimler getting to room with Rutherford. And I like these two being together. We haven't seen a lot of Boimler and Rutherford together, so I like that they're going to have some, hopefully, scenes and storylines together now that they're roommates. And I love that Boimler feeling at home, like having a roommate, and also like banging his head into the wall and getting the denti in there again, I thought was really, really wonderful. But then all this leads me to Rutherford's storyline, where he gets a rival in Livik and constantly trying to get a promotion, but not being able to outdo Livik. And all of these are like fun, like we increased it by 0.6%, like all these like back and forth like Star Trek things. My favorite one was the Tucker tubes, which is obviously a reference to Trip Tucker from Star Trek Enterprise. But the thing that he was working on were these tubes that appeared in the background, like of a bunch of not just Star Trek stuff, but a bunch of sci-fi stuff. It's like one of those props that just appears in a bunch of random science fiction projects over the years. That's at like some prop house, I'm sure, somewhere. And so just to see that in the episode, but then like adding a third one that Livik does and calling it the Billups tubes was wonderful. But then this all leads to Livik about to get the promotion, and then Tendi saying like, no, look, I order you, we're going to be friends. And again, this sweet moment where like Tendi uses like playfully her power to just, be friends with Rutherford and make Rutherford feel it's okay, we're still going to be together. And just Rutherford and Tendi are the sweetest, and I adore them, and I ship them so hard. They're just so absolutely wonderful. But then just like asking for a promotion, and then Livik, then he's the rival of Rutherford now. I hope that comes back at some point. That was just a bunch of fun. So again, just a very sweet ending. And again, this is why I love Lower Decks overall. Like every one of these stories had a very sweet, heartwarming ending, and even some melancholic bits with the saying goodbye to the bunks. I love Lower Decks just whenever it just this sweet, kind, loving thing. And every one of these stories had that element in there, this sort of like joyous love of the weird and of each other and radical support of each other. Like that is what Lower Decks to me is about, and this episode captured it. So a couple critiques here and there in terms of like some repetitive beats and a couple storytelling elements that I think could have been a little stronger, but overall this just captures the heart and soul of what I love about Lower Decks to its core. So another great episode of Lower Decks, not that we are surprised. So with all that said, give me a Moopsy, Star Trek merchandising team, and with all that said, I hope you all live long and prosper.